Well, welcome to Retire Repurposed. Today we are addressing a pattern Ben has observed in countless retirees over the years. The tendency to live out retirement according to others' expectations rather than personal truth. Why do so many find themselves picking up hobbies they don't enjoy or traveling extensively when they'd rather be at home? The wisdom of Proverbs 23:7 offers profound insight. Here it is. For as a man thinks, so is he. Whatever you believe about yourself, your life, your retirement will inevitably be lived out in your reality. Join us as Ben Taatjes explores this powerful truth and unpacks the transformative principle that if you know who you are, you will know what to do. This conversation goes beyond retirement activities to the heart of your identity, your mindset, helping you discover a retirement that genuinely reflects who you were created to be, not what society says retirement should look like. Enjoy this episode. All right, folks, welcome back to the show. Jared Sebesta joining you on another episode of Retire Repurposed. We are so glad that you are joining us here today. If you've missed the last couple of episodes, we have really had some stellar conversations. You know, a couple of episodes ago, we talked about how less is more, kind of taking a note out of Greg McKeown's book, Essentialism, where to have the really great things in life, sometimes we need to kind of scale back and get rid of some clutter, both physically, mentally, maybe even financially, for your life. And then on last week's show, we talked about, if we're going to scale back on some of the noise, on some of the clutter, then where should we put that freed up energy? What are the things that we really need to press in on? What are the things that we need to go all in on? And so on last week's show, we gave you 5 specific things that it is now time for you to kind of go all in on and really try to dig the gold out of in your life. Ben Taatjes joins me on the show now, and one of the 5, we're not going to give them all away, but one of the 5 was really found in working. And we didn't want to use the word work, but we wanted to use the word service or intentional work, or better yet, purposeful work. Which one kind of stuck out most for you?
Yeah, I want people to notice and appreciate the high value that work gives them, right, during their life. And the best part of most people's day job was when they got to impact a person. They got to use their skills, talents, abilities to make a difference in somebody's life. So that's the piece when we talk about work or service or whatever word we're going to use, that we have to continue to keep at the forefront, is look at the pre-fall work and say, okay, in the garden, I believe there was work. It's pretty clear in the Bible. Why, right? We are closer to our Creator when we're created in His image. So He was a creator. We need to be creators. We need to be adding value, doing things for others. And that's exactly why I think that's such an important thing to be talking about.
And again, we kind of hesitated using the word work, not because that we think work is bad, but because of kind of the negative connotation associated with work. People retire to get away from work, so these guys are telling people that they need to start
what kind of show is this?
Right.
Why are you telling me that work is so great? I'm trying to retire to get away from it. And I would say most people don't want to just get away from all of work, but there's some parts of their job that I think just aren't going well. And I go back to the book by Arthur Brooks, The Strength to Strength. They've had entire podcasts on this show about that, how important it is to find the right type of work in the right season of life. He talks about crystallized and fluid intelligence, right? And it wasn't his original work. It was a guy, I think Cattell was his last name. But anyway, the general premise is like we, in our younger years, excel and do a better job at one type of work, which is the kind of this what they call fluid, like it's quick thinking, it's moving, it's doing all the stuff that a younger person likes to do. And then later on in life, right, we get better at the crystallized, really wisdom. So I'd go back and look for that episode here, but ultimately it's an example of why I think people start not liking their job. They're still doing the job that they liked when they were in their 20s or 30s, or 40s. Really, that you should be shifting what you do in the work you do. Again, I'm using the word work here, but even in retirement, you should still be gaining a ton of satisfaction and reward in helping really the next generation. Like that's why, I mean, we look at wisdom, and these older people have so much to offer. You've got to capitalize on that, and you'll be better for it. So will the people that you're interacting with.
I saw a quote, and I mentioned it last week on the show, where it's like, people aren't necessarily burnt out. They're just doing the wrong things. They're doing stuff that is not in alignment with who they were created to be anymore, or who they've then become, perhaps, later in their life. So something to consider as you maybe perhaps consider retirement and eyeball it down the road, or perhaps freshly retired. Work isn't bad. We still need to be kind of in that zone, in that sweet spot where our purpose, our skills, talents, and abilities are being expressed in a way that is adding service to other people. If you want to get the entire show, you want to learn all 5, that was just a little taste, go back and listen to last week's show. And even before you do that, go back to the second to last show, because that will really even tee up last week's show. But some really, really solid stuff there on the podcast here the last couple of weeks. Ben, on this week's show, we were preparing for what we were going to talk about here today. And we were preparing by saying, you were telling me, people just, they're not living the life that they really want, or perhaps they're living out some sort of kind of fake facade. And you've told me how you have many meetings with retirees, and they end up kind of doing things because they feel like they're supposed to, and it's really not them. Can you give an example?
Well, I think the 2 words I want to compare and contrast are passing time and purposeful. Right. So if I look at somebody that's just passing time, they just find things to occupy their time, and really very little gets accomplished. And somebody that's purposeful means I'm being intentional and taking ownership and deciding what I'm going to do. So I've had several clients, one recently that I can think of, that had done, I want to make sure it doesn't get tied back, but had done something in like it was like a miniature vacation. And it was something that I think they did it just because they thought they were supposed to. Like he was like, yeah, this is something that retired people do. I was like, what's that mean? What is it? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Explain that to me. And he's like, well, I travel and blah, blah, blah. And he kind of went through the thing. He's like, I didn't really enjoy it. I said, well, why did you go on this particular trip? He's like, well, it's something retired people do. And I think when I got deeper into that question, it came out pretty clearly. Like, he's having almost an identity crisis of like, I'm just doing what other retirees do, and what he's seeing, or even thinking in his own mind what other retirees enjoy doing. And he wasn't being himself. And I think that's going back to the stuff we talked about last show, like being aligned with what he should be doing, not with what he sees others do.
Well, even on the financial side of things, you talk about how I don't want to go down the financials, but you basically say a lot of people will come into your office and they say, I want to retire, and you'll say, why? And you're like, well, I turned 65 in a year. And then your first question is like, well, what's that got to do with it? Yeah. Just talk about the social pressures that people are feeling leading up to retirement.
Yeah, well, they're like, I'm in my 60s. I've got to start looking at retirement. And 62, by the way, that's this other magical number that comes up, and that's the first year or age that you can start taking Social Security. Now, yeah, it's going to be discounted because you're not of your full retirement age, which, by the way, the FRA that the Social Security puts out, our full retirement age, it keeps getting older. And I'll also have that conversation, Jared, where people be like, well, I guess I was going to retire at, 66, but now they kicked the FRA up, so I'm going to go to 67. And I'm like, well, just as bad. Like, don't let the government tell you when you should retire. They don't know much of anything, it seems, lately, but they certainly don't know the date at which you as a person should be retiring, what's best for you. So again, take ownership of that and say, okay, what are most important things in my life? Back to this identity question, what do I want my retirement to look like? I don't care what I saw this person do or that person do. You don't even know. They could be miserable in their life. Yeah. What makes you happy? What makes you tick? What parts of your job did you like? Should you keep in your retirement? Yeah. And then bigger question yet is, should I even retire at all? Sure. I mean, there's some people that's like, yeah, I don't want to make that shift. I want to start working when I want to, right? I want the freedom. So engineer your life so that it works. That's a really good point. Going back to the traveling thing, again, I'm not of retirement age, but I've been in this space with you long enough to know that
that is certainly a, it's like the quintessential thing that you do. And I've heard it even, and I'm not sitting kneecap to kneecap with retirees like you are, but I've even heard that where it's like, what are you going to do? You're retiring. I'll meet somebody on the road and, hey, I'm retiring, later this year. What do you plan on doing? Oh, travel a little bit. But you said it's like, and I've heard you say this many times before over the years we've talked about this and worked together. It's like, if you didn't like traveling before, there's not some magical switch that says now all of a sudden you're going to enjoy doing all these things that you see older people doing on all the advertisements, right?
Yeah, I think, I've seen a lot of clients who think they're going to be world travelers when they retire.
Yeah.
And even they're saving money so that someday they can retire and travel. At the end of the day, they get to retirement and either they do a couple of the trips and it lets them down because they're kind of outside of that sweet spot for enjoying walking around and seeing all the things.
Yeah.
Or for a lot of them, it's just life experience. There's more important things than doing some of those trips and doing some of the things that they thought they would enjoy. Now, I'd much rather have somebody spend their wealth on experiences like trips and stuff, but I also think it's really important that you take the right people with you on those trips, so you see it together.
Sure.
So I do think that too often times we let out there dictate in here. So we're sitting there and we're saying, saw so and so do this retirement. This is how they did it. I'm going to do the same. I mean, again, everybody is so unique and different in what a good retirement is. Same thing. I say, people come in and get the financials and they were trying to put that all together. Like, well, how much do I need? Well, tell me how you want to live.
Right.
And I've had people retire with, not a huge nest egg, but they don't have debt and they're able to have a part-time job, rely on their Social Security, and they're just very frugal and it works. Okay. That's great. It fits what they want.
Yeah.
I've also had people retire with several $1 million and it ends up feeling like, well, are we going to run out? So again, it's more a lifestyle decision than it is really a retirement decision. It's lifestyle.
You bring up a really good point. I've heard this from other coaches, influencers out there where they say, you should be the cause, not the effect. You get to dictate, the life that you want. And I think that is really kind of the foundational piece of the show. You brought up a concept, you mentioned identity. When I think of identity, I also think of like mindset. In your opinion, is it more of an identity conversation or a mindset, or maybe is it both?
I think it's both. And I think different retirees have, struggle with different sides of that same coin, right? It's the identity thing. I'll typically see that portion impact somebody more if they were a really career focused, long term, career oriented type person.
Sure.
So take an executive or somebody that owned their own business, farmer, right? That's a business owner, and somebody that really what do you do? Well, I'm a farmer. They never say I'm a retired farmer either. I'm a farmer. So they stick with that identity. If you have somebody that has more of a job, they've just said, I go to work 9 to 5, whatever my hours are, 8 to 5, whatever. And at the end of the week, it's I'm done. I get home and I'm easy to flip off the switch and I'm just home.
Yeah.
In some ways, they have an easier transition than the thriver, the person that ran his own company and farm, whatever it might be, the business owner, because they're a little bit disconnected from that identity. They're like, it's just something I do, not something I am, right? So I think that's important that we recognize that everybody's different there, and different retires are going to struggle different things when it's identity or just the societal norms of what retirees do.
Sure. Yeah. I think that they're probably, I would agree with you. It seems like mindset is kind of our thought patterns, things that we believe. Identity, I'd take your opinion on this because I'm interested to hear what you have to say, but identity is a little bit deeper perhaps. And you kind of said it, it's like, this is who I am. How would you describe your identity, and how does the lines kind of get crossed sometimes between our true identity and where societal norms, maybe our career, kind of start to take over?
Yeah, if you're asking me what where I find my identity, Jared, I've struggled with that. Even in the last couple of years, I don't think it's a midlife crisis. It's just a crisis. I mean, I don't know if I'm middle of my life or not, but we're doing a pretty major rebranding and a name change on the financial firm here. We're moving. Currently, it's Taatjes Financial Group. Well, my last name's Taatjes. And there's a piece of me that always saw that logo of my name on it. It's like, yeah, I created that. That's who I am. I made this business that, now has got 11 people here, and we're growing really fast. One of the top advisors in our firm. And it's both I think a humility or pride thing, but also identity thing. Like, what if this wasn't here, Jared? What if I didn't have Taatjes Financial Group? How would it look? And actually, I came to the realization we're changing the name. I can't announce what it is yet because it's not public, but we will be changing the name of Taatjes Financial Group to something different. And some of the rationale, there's many other reasons for it, being, of course, the company's grown a lot bigger than one person. But some of it for me was, I've got to take my name off of this. I don't own it. God owns it. And I need to start looking at it that way. So from an identity, who I am now, I mean, I could firmly say, I'm, husband to my wife, father to my kids, and son of God. I really believe that. And I think that last piece is the one that I'm trying to get, I don't say better at. I mean, God's always been there right alongside of me, but I tend to not talk to him enough. And maybe it's become a little more of the, a little less relational, right? It's like, yeah, I'm a believer. This is the nuts and bolts of what I believe, but I want the personal relationship to get stronger again, right? I think my identity being too focused on my work, too focused on success or the money that we've made or the things that we have has definitely crept into my life. So part of the reason I think for a retiree, they'll resonate with that is if you are finding your identity, even purpose, inside of your job, your career, and you walk away from that cold turkey, it is going to be really, really, really hard. That will be a lot harder for most of the people I work with and coach than simply, not getting the paycheck.
Right.
The financials will come pretty easy. It's really the other stuff that's harder.
Yeah. Again, it's really, if I'm hearing you right, it's who you are. And I think that's a really valid question to ask yourself, especially, and I think you would agree with this, when you're going along or through a major transition, look in the mirror and ask yourself, who the heck am I? And that, it's a very sobering question.
If I took away my work, if I took away my family, if I took away the things that are most important to me, who would I be? What would I fall back on? And of course, I've found that in the hardest times, it's easier to have that answer. Well, yeah, I'd rely on God, and that's ultimately what we should be saying all the time. But it's pretty easy when everything's going well and we've got things going well to say, well, I'm pretty in control here, right? And I think that's something that we just got to be very careful of. So whether or not it's an identity or a mindset thing, I do think that culture plays a huge role in this, right? Even this culture of success and like, oh yeah, as we move further up, and I mean that's the reason. Like even the financial companies, like, hey, way to go! You're moving further and further up. You're in the top 10. You're in the top whatever of the entire company. Well, they want you to think that, well, now I can be number one someday. Because that's more, essentially, it's more growth for them at the end of the day. But for me, what does that do to me? What does that do to my family and my quality of life? And I think retirees need to hear that is if either your success, if your, I think your career has taken over who you think you are, be very ready for that shift when you move out of that place. If you're a pastor and you were lead pastor, when you become just another person in the pew, that's tough. When you're a teacher retiring after 30, 40 years and now, that's an emptiness there. Just be very ready for that and don't think that it just happens overnight.
It's a really powerful conversation because I think if you can get this part down, you're kind of, the pump is primed to really walk into a really great season of life, but this is a foundational piece that has to be correct and to go back to this word that we keep using, aligned. The whole reason why we're having this conversation is because you found yourself seeing retirees doing things that that really aren't in alignment with really who they are. The one side of the coin is the identity. The other side, you could argue perhaps less important, but another side of the same coin is the mindset piece. How would you describe mindset? I kind of think of it as a set of beliefs that we believe to be true about ourselves or our lives. But how do you define that, and how do our mindsets kind of keep us maybe locked in a box or skewed off of alignment for retirees?
It's everything, man. I mean, I think if you have a retiree that says, well, I'm a retiree, I'm retired, they're going to start doing things retirees do or what they think they do. Mm-hmm. And if it's following the culture, it's, well, I do less for others and more for myself, and I focus on my trips and my vacation and my this and my that. And I just think that's a huge miss. So, the Bible talks about, we were talking before the show, I mean, so much wisdom in the book of Proverbs 23:27, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Right. And you brought that up because you do work with coaching, and I thought, yeah, that's it. Mm-hmm. Right. And I've said to clients, I've heard this before, where somebody says, if you know who you are, you'll know what to do. Mm. And I think if you're a retiree, you're like, well, I'm a retiree and I know who I am. Well, I'm a retiree. That's my identity. And you start doing retiree things. Right. And those are things that don't actually align with your purpose, your calling. It's an easy way to find unhappiness.
Well, be careful what you wish for, because if deep in your subconscious or mindset or beliefs, whatever you want to call it, is that retirees are old, they don't have value, they don't do anything really anymore, they're just passing time, kind of these kind of quintessential thoughts of retirees, and then you start to identify with that and you believe that you are one of those, be very, very careful, because I believe this, and you can take this for what it's worth, but like whatever you believe, your body, your brain, your world will start to emulate the things that you believe. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's going to try to prove you right.
Yep. Yeah.
And like Proverbs says, like, as you think, so it shall be. So if you think retirees are washed up and it's kind of over, and you believe that in your subconscious and you now identify with that, guess what your life will emulate?
Yeah. And it's so easy, Jared, to start to think that, right? Because again, you've got more time to think, you got more time away from this career, this job that kept you going and gave you purpose, right? It gave you a reason, an ability to which you could use your skills, abilities, talents to impact others. Mm-hmm. And now it's just you. And now it's maybe you and friends, you and spouse, but maybe you're a little bit isolated at times. And you start to see, oh yeah, retires, I am getting older. Yeah, I did kind of have to leave. Either my partnership agreement said it, or maybe it was just the age that the government said it was time to retire. At the end of the day, you're going to start to see yourself through that lens. And that's a very, very scary thing. You
said something pretty powerful just a couple of minutes ago. You said, whatever you believe about yourself, you will be. And also, too, you said that if you know who you are, you'll know what to do. Let's end the show there. How can people start to rewrite this script? What is true? Where should people find their identity? What should their mindset be about themselves in retirement?
Well, the truth is that you're not a retiree. You are a child of God. You're whether it be a husband, wife, your father, mother, whatever you are, whatever stage of life you're in, you've got a calling on your life. You've got to figure out how you're going to make a difference in the kingdom of God. I believe that 100%. And if you can find that, like, what am I doing and to follow alongside of his plan for my life, that doesn't end nor begin at retirement.
I agree. So that's the truth. Now, how can they start to apply it? Like, what is something tangible a fresh retiree could start to take this and put kind of the rubber on the road, so to speak?
We've talked a lot on the show about creating a repurposed statement. Like, companies have mission statements, Jared. I wouldn't want to be part of a company that didn't know what they were trying to accomplish. I think retirees should have that. Like, here's what's most important to me, even a set of values. Here's how we're going to live our retirement. Get together with your spouse or a friend and say, this is how I'm planning on doing this. Here's the value system. Here is my purpose in retirement. This is what my repurpose is going to look like. And then that's the lens at which you start to make decisions. Do I volunteer at this organization or that one? Do I take time to do this or that? It all can be run through that lens.
Securities offered through Avantax Investment Services. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Avantax Advisory Services. Insurance services offered through an Avantax affiliated insurance agency.